Hello everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. Today we have some pro-revenge stories and our first story of the day is by vonadler. Fired? Are you sure? Okay. Note 1. This story was told to me by a friend and is about her father. I won't be able to answer many follow-up questions. It takes place around 2005. I believe the story to be true but can't verify it, of course. Note 2, this happens in Sweden where there's no at-will employment. Once an employee is past the initial 6-month probation period, you can't fire them without a cause, which also requires an established paper trail. Note 3, I am not a native English speaker and professional terms may be wrong. I'm happy to take any corrections. So my friend's father, since retired, was a mechanical engineer. He was around 55 when this happened and very experienced in his field. In fact, he had some skill sets that were close to unique to the extent that you might be able to replicate them, but at extreme costs. We're talking multiple people from multiple companies from multiple countries taking weeks, if not months, to get up to speed with specific projects to do the same things. He was also a no BS kind of guy who did his job, did it well, but also pointed out problems and expected others to point out problems to him. He was extremely solution-oriented and had no time for office politics or keeping a positive attitude at work. Basically, your everyday grumpy older engineer who really knew his thing and was always ready to help you if you asked, but not very forthcoming in team building exercises and so on. He also ran his own business on the side, doing minor projects and so on. As was required by his employer, he had reported this and was sure to not cause any conflicts of interests, so his employer knew and accepted this. He was considered a valuable employee and got several awards that he cared little for, but anyway. During his many years with this employer, by all accounts, they paid him well, respected his knowledge, and accommodated his style, and he returned the favor by working very hard and making sure to mentor younger and newly employed engineers to make them effective coworkers. Then his firm was acquired by a larger firm and a new management team installed. Initially, everyone was promised that things would remain the same. But with the new management came a new office culture. The new management pressured for unpaid overtime for a more American corporate culture with cheering and clapping and so on. He considered it extremely cringe and refused to participate. His status as a long-standing and knowledgeable employee kept him safe for some time before the new management realized that resistance to the new culture centered around him and started pressuring him to play along. When he did not, they turned increasingly hostile, realizing that he held a lot of soft power in the company, having mentored a large percentage of the engineers and resistance to their leadership centering around him. They started ordering him to work overtime. He answered that he was on time with his projects and that if they had identified an emergency requiring overtime, they would have to bring it up with the union to negotiate the overtime and make sure it was an actual emergency. The contract with the union said no overtime unless in an emergency. They tried to force him to participate in the cheering and clapping by making it mandatory for him to attend and yelling at him to participate, and he did, but so unenthusiastically that the event turned even more cringe and people started laughing. The workday turned more and more hostile, and he knew that things would come to a head sooner or later. Being an experienced engineer and knowing how to document things, he already had his ducks in a row. Then it finally happened. They caught him answering an email for his side business on his work laptop, brought him in, and fired him on the spot for theft of company resources. He sat at the conference table and looked the 3 managers in their eyes, one after the other, and asked, "Are you sure you want to do this?" They all said yes. "Are you really sure you want to do this?" He was escorted to his desk by security to leave his phone, his badge, and his computer at the desk, and then escorted out. Once out of the building, he phoned his union representative who immediately canceled the firing, claiming there was no just cause, which meant that it would go to the labor board for arbitration. You see, the company had an IT policy that it was okay to use the company laptop for personal business, including a side business, as long as you were on a break and compliant with IT security protocols, and the company was aware of and had approved his side business, signed by his former manager, and the IT policy available, and sent both to the union representative. Then he called his lawyer and asked him to send the pre-prepared cease and desist on 2 patents he held. Patents that were not that significant and nothing he could make any serious money out of, since they were mostly for very specific things used by the solutions he designed and used at his employers, but still his that he had brought with him into the employment and allowed the employer to use in exchange for a slightly higher pay. All duly documented in his contract, of course. Then he went home for some vacation and tending his side business. He was always a man to prepare and had enough money saved up to last him for a good time, to the extent that he considered retiring entirely. My friend said he had 2 job offers from competitors that had looked to snipe him for some time within the week. Basically, as soon as they learned he was available, he was gracious but declined, but offered them to consult with his side business now that he had the time, which they eagerly accepted, at twice the hourly rate he had made at his earlier employers. His colleagues started ringing the day after for advice, since the projects he had managed could not go on without him. He was perfectly polite, but denied any information and help, saying he had left everything he had with management and to contact them as he was no longer employed there. Several clients that phoned his private number were told the same thing. Since his private number was not on a public registry, he suspected that both colleagues and clients spent some time and/or money to find it. It took 2 weeks before a manager phoned him and asked things. He politely declined to answer, got yelled at, and replied with something like, "I am sorry, you must have mistaken me for someone who works for you," and hung up. This happened a few times, and the next week, HR phoned him and stated the firing had been a mistake and he was welcome back to his job. He again politely declined, saying that he awaited the labor board's decision, but until then he was happy to consult for them, at 6 times his hourly pay. After taxes and administrative costs, of course. After a few days of wrangling and trying to negotiate, they had to accept. And then he sprung the patent issue on them, forcing them to pay for those too. Less than 2.5 weeks after being fired, he was back at his desk. After roughly 3 months, the firing came to the labor board. The employer stated that they believed they had handled the issue correctly, but were still willing to offer my friend's father his position back, in the interest of goodwill and reconciliation. My friend's father and the union simply stated that he was now employed elsewhere, his own company, and no longer available. The labor board ruled in my friend's father's and union's favor, and he got the normal damages: 3 months' pay damage and 24 months' pay severance package, including pension and of course the lawyer costs of the union paid by the employer. According to my friend, her father continued to work there until he retired, working 20 hours or so per week and 10 to 15 hours for other companies, making a pretty penny, continuing to charge them 3 times what he charged their competitors as an a-hole tax. The managers were not fired, but they were moved into their own group apart from the rest of the department when it came to bonus calculations and the costs of her father's consultancy fees, and the costs of the labor board arbitration were budgeted there, meaning they were constantly over budget and thus ineligible for bonuses for several years, which was a decent percentage of the incentives at that company, making at least one of them quit. My friend also said her father usually met any management complaints with a big poop-eating grin and "What are you going to do? Fire me?" after that. So let me ask you guys, do you think the friend's father should have let up a bit when they admitted their mistake and offered the position back? Or do you think the employers already had dug their own grave and friend's father was totally justified in having them just keep shoveling away? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Our next story is by WhatALowCreditScore. Roommate wants tea? Too bad. Okay, a little background. I live with 4 people, and having 5 roommates in one house is tough. COVID raises tension, of course, so I try to let things go in an effort to stay sane. I work from home, and so do 2 of my other roommates. Roommate 4 has a day job she leaves every day for. Roommate 5 is a cook, so he is usually home during the day and at work from 4 to 11 p.m. Roommate number 5 is usually a problem with noise. He blasts music, blares his TV, slams the front door coming in and out 10 times in 5 minutes, etc. I'm not the type to do the passive-aggressive text thing, so anytime he's being loud, I try to go downstairs to ask him to stop. Magically, as soon as my feet hit the stairs, he's always suddenly quiet, which is what I wanted, so fine. We don't have the conversation where I ask him to be quieter. Today was a new low. The kettle starts whistling. Now, my room is on the 3rd floor and the kitchen is on the 1st. I could hear the screaming kettle 2 floors up and through my closed door. I was about to leave, so I was pulling clothes out of my closet and then changing. I ordered groceries on my phone and then made sure I had a list of all of the things we were out of so I could go pick them up at the corner store. I then used the restroom. Point is, I lingered, and that kettle just kept screaming. Finally, I went downstairs to take the kettle off of the burner. On my way, on the 2nd floor, I can hear through their bedroom doors that both my work-from-home roommates are on conference calls. When I get to the 1st floor, the front door is wide open and wonderful roommate number 5 is chilling right outside. So when I take the kettle off the burner, I decide to get petty. Roommate number 5 doesn't deserve hot water anymore because he's selfish. I dumped all the water out. If he wants tea, he can actually pay attention to the kettle next time. I definitely think it's a little petty, but there's only so much you really can put up with, and if that one little act of revenge is what helps you kind of get over it or gives you enough satisfaction to just move on, I don't think it really harmed anybody. And obviously they weren't caring too much because they let that thing go for way too long. This next story is by ThugWifey. People won't break down their boxes. I live in a large apartment building and every floor has one trash room. There are signs everywhere that say to please break down your box and throw it down the trash chute. Well, especially since COVID hit with people doing more online shopping, the trash room has been overflowing with unbroken boxes. There are residents that apparently believe the maintenance workers should break it down for them. I find this extremely rude, especially during COVID times. Many of those residents don't bother to at least black out or rip off their address, which show which apartment it came from. So, I do them a favor and bring their box back to their apartment with a little friendly reminder note to break down their crap. Good on OP, people should be responsible. If you buy a whole bunch of stuff from Amazon and you have 12 boxes, it's not fun to break it all down, especially if you need to kind of rip the boxes in half to make it really fit down the chute, but it's the least you can do as a human being to do your part, right? And if it's big enough to accommodate any sized box regardless, there's really no excuse because all you have to do is break the tape on the bottom side and it can fold flat. Our next story is by Kanadark. Not eating those cookies? No problem. We grew up around the corner from a Peak Friends cookie factory, and my dad used to bring bulk bags to the office for the cookie jar. Everyone used to contribute $1 a month to keep the cookie jar stocked. Now, these cookies were usually imperfect, a touch too dark, too much filling, or mixed when they were switching over lines. This is important. One guy refused to contribute, saying he never ate the cookies. This would have been fine, but not only did he eat the cookies, he ate more than anyone else and would regularly take some home to boot. My dad and his coworkers were fed up and came up with a plan. A week after the latest batch of cookies had arrived, the guy went up to my dad and said, "Kanadark's dad, I know they're from the factory store, but you need to complain. These Oreos have no filling in them." The office gathered around to let him know that everyone who had contributed to the cookie fund had taken the opportunity to sit and lick the filling out of the cookies before putting them back in the jar. The guy gave my dad a $50 bill and was always first to pony up for the cookie fund afterwards. Honestly, that guy must have really liked cookies if he experienced all his coworkers equally licking the filling out of the cookies and putting them back so he could eat them, yet still sticking around and paying for the cookies and eating them with his coworkers. Also, this story made me think, I kind of like those cookies that were a touch too dark. Am I weird like that? Let me know. And our final story of the day is by MrDreamThief. My old boss upset me, so I'm getting even. My boss retired a month ago. He was getting on in years and didn't want to work every day. In the past 6 months of his full time, he sat around in his office and didn't do anything of import. He forwarded all of his work to me. After he retired, he became a consultant, visiting the company every few days to consult about stuff. He stopped into my labs twice and wasted my time telling me long butt stories about crap I don't care about that happened to him in the 70s, and stories I've usually already heard. I've told him he is not my boss anymore. I have more work to do now that he's gone, and I don't have the time to sit and chew the fat. He doesn't listen. He wants to tell his stories. Today, I started my petty revenge. He said he wants PDFs of the certification I fill out every day emailed to him before I leave work. I email them to him from our copier, so he receives them upside down on his computer and has to print them off. If they're very technologically illiterate, it's definitely a good little petty revenge. However, in most cases, you're able to just press like one button to rotate a PDF. So there is a chance that this chance at revenge could have basically been next to nothing. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So which of these stories was your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing and turn notifications on if you haven't so you'll never miss an upcoming video. Any little thing that you do helps the channel grow so much more. Whether it's commenting, subscribing, or just watching the video, thank you all so very much for supporting me right here on the Storytime channel. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all next time, right here.